So first of all, I want to thank DAMA South Africa for the invitation. Howard and I have been talking back and forth for a little while, and Mark actually, I think, put a little bit of a bug in Howard's ear that this might be an interesting topic for you folks.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. So, yeah, without further ado, I think what I'll do is just start the slideshow, and we'll go from there. And hopefully, Debbie will be able to catch up. So the title of the show, the title of the presentation today is using a faceted vocabulary. As the introduction pointed out, thanks very much. It's also very much about the graph technology that I'm using a lot these days.
Yep.
And it's actually proven to be quite useful in a number of different directions, but especially with this model that I've been working on. So I saw this or heard this in a movie, Sic Parvis Magna, and it really sort of summarizes what we're doing here, the approach here. A vocabulary is a very small thing, but I think when it's
John,
done
can I
correctly.
interrupt you? At the moment, we're seeing
Your
a
teams.
copy of just the normal team screen that's just showing the attendees. Are we not seeing?
Okay. Let me just go back and see if I can find the.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, there's the first. Okay, bit of a lumpy start, but that's usually a good sign that interesting things are going to happen. Okay,
it can only get
great.
better.
Just from small beginnings. Exactly. So here we go. I just want to, before we start on our small beginning, I just want to show you something that's actually been a little bit inspiring for me. It's a single video that was created by a fellow named Igor Stefanovich. And it kind of speaks a little bit to what we're trying to achieve with this model. It's a concept called articulation, and the human hand is a perfect example of this. It's it's flexible. It's you can pick up everything. You can do everything from picking up pins or pointing at objects or create a fist or that kind of thing. So, but the important part is these carpals, metacarpals, and carpals and stuff like that are all articulated. That's what gives it its power and its flexibility. So I just wanted to touch on that. The separation of concern. So these pieces the separation is called articulation, and it's a really powerful technique for managing very complex problems because it breaks it down into individual components and how they relate, which is essentially what a graph does. So the question becomes then, okay, so what concerns are we separating? I posted this on LinkedIn. I got a little bit of a snapback right away saying, hey, man, we're doing the best we can, never mind the boxing gloves. But it's kind of illustrative. The way that current enterprise applications, there's so many of them and so many issues with non-interoperable applications that it's kind of like wearing a pair of boxing gloves to play the piano. So what we're doing here is we're separating language from data, data from applications. All of that list there is essentially saying when we pull these things and tease these things apart, we can not only liberate the enterprise data, but we can actually reconnect it in some really interesting and powerful ways. This is me. Doesn't look exactly like me anymore, but is close enough. Some of the career highlights, I just wanted to give myself a bit of a brag, but the journey to Q6, which is my classification model, essentially began at a university college in Calgary here over 20 years ago. The idea was we actually took a whole bunch of applications for the university college, everything from student registration to finance to professional workload, all of those types of things, and we basically liquefied all of that data. And when we put it back together, we found some interesting sort of gaps in their revenue model, and it resulted in additional $1 million every year. I worked for BMC Software in Houston for a while, and they had the multiple of multiples problem where they're looking at multiple versions, multiple formats, and multiple languages on the technical documentation side. And this is where the Q6 model actually was born in Texas, and just saying, well, it's too complicated to try to manage this in a relational database or folders or any other tool that was available at that time. And then the third one is this enterprise level information management platform, which after I guess 20 years of discovery and invention and all that kind of stuff, we're starting to build this out into this faceted vocabulary. So here's a list of the problems that we're solving. You always start with some of the issues that are happening in data management. This first one is one that just everywhere that I've gone in my engagements over the last 15 or 20 years has or had this problem, or still has this problem, where enterprise search just doesn't work the way it was supposed to. Google Search Appliance bowed out of, they finally stopped supporting their Google Search Appliance for enterprise in 2019. And the reason for that, it was a $50,000 piece of hardware that didn't do what it was supposed to do. So you typically get too much information or not enough. And really simple things like acronyms and abbreviations give you all kinds of results, but not the ones you want. So the solution is to apply a universal product code classification standard for every artifact of business language. The second one, and I'll spend quite a bit of time on this in the presentation, is this lack of end-to-end connectivity. Typical business glossaries, data dictionaries, they're a lot of work to stand up. They're a lot of work to maintain. But one of the problems that they have is they don't connect anything beyond that, like downstream of that. So if the premise is that you need business glossaries to understand the language of the business, then shouldn't those glossaries extend to things like content and analytics? It's a good question. I think they should. So this is going to be a little bit of a suppository, a support of that idea. That nice mix there. Yeah, it's too early. Where's the coffee? Anyway, it's support of the argument that if you're going to spend all that time and money, to your point, Howard, about how expensive it is to get to ontologies, if you're going to spend all the money on a glossary, why don't you make it work everywhere? So the solution is to create what I call, and a little bit of a play on words, but intranet of strings. So to link language to insight. The last problem that this addresses is application overburden, and Dave McComb of Semantic Arts has written a couple of books on this. Just the pure cost of applications and the reason they don't always work, and the failure of IT projects, et cetera, et cetera. It's a real litany of challenges. But applications, to stand up a new one and support it, and unfortunately, what happens is they tend to create and recreate data. So this new idea, the data mesh, that we can just split enterprise data into product groups and everybody will be happy, is kind of I think it's a bit of a pipe dream. I think the principle works, but not the way that data mesh folks talk about it. So the solution here, it's a bit of a play on the environment thing. The first one is you have to reduce duplications and reduce or at least manage variance. You have to be able to reveal your work. You have to show your work, and it has to be relatively quickly, because people, as we know, anything to do with data governance or data management, people tend to get quickly bored if they have to do more than 5 minutes worth of work every day on that front. Reuse sort of contributes to the reduction part, but reuse basically, again, says if I'm going to use resources to create something, I should reuse them as much as possible. It's kind of been the holy grail of, for example, technical writing, topic reuse, and then repeat. So that's the solution that we're proposing for application overburden. So basics, always start with definitions. A facet is simply a dimension of communication. People, places, things, activities, status, all of those are facets of business vocabulary. The model that I use has 19 facets, and I'll show you those in a bit. Vocabulary, the way I define vocabulary, I'm trying to stay away from glossary if I can, because vocabulary is a broader term. But vocabulary is just elements of business communication. They come in all different shapes and sizes, abbreviations, acronyms, codes, et cetera, et cetera. I don't make any distinction between reference and master data. If an enterprise wants to do so, that's entirely their prerogative. But here's some examples of vocabulary: active South Africa, DAMA, those basically picking up from the webinar. So the classification is the process of connecting a key to a value. So key value pairs are kind of important in graph technology. So here's these examples that I've listed here. Status, a status facet has an active value, location has a value of South Africa, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially, I've just merged these two things together. One of the principles of Q6 is that the 19 facets are mutually exclusive and exhaustive, but they're also highly constrained. So there is no 20th facet. I've been working on this model for 21 years, and I haven't found facet number 20 yet. So the facets and the connectors, like the edges in GraphSpeak, very highly constrained and for a reason, but they, like that articulation video, the constraints on the kinds of facets you can have and the way they're connected gives you control, but it also gives you incredible flexibility. You can create anything you want from those 19 facets and 6 connectors. Equivalence is a really important concept to grasp in terms of reuse. It's also the way that Q6 does entity resolution. So for example, if I have an acronym, or sorry, if I have a company named Acme Incorporated, I can make Acme Incorporated semantically equivalent to Acme Inc. So it gives you some tools for doing the data management, the data quality things that we want to do without being overly burdensome. So here's some examples of equivalence. SA equals South Africa, 1117 to 2021 equals November 21st. This is Vardskap. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. It's Swedish translation of hosting. So equivalence can be done on things like acronyms, abbreviations, but also on language translations. And then finally on things like when we rendition a document from, say, mydoc1234.docx to mydoc1234.pdf, their formats are different, but semantically they're the same. So it's important to be able to keep track of those equivalents, and that's what equivalence does. And finally, the holy grail, I guess, of things like healthcare and is semantic interoperability. I defined it as a modular characteristic of an application. So it's basically the Toyota model where I can swap out one part of a Toyota Camry and place another part in there that's exactly the same, but maybe the same function might be slightly different shape. But in the digital world, because it's so much more flexible, essentially what we're talking about is connecting semantically equivalent components without loss of identity, class, or meaning. So when we create an artifact, and I'll show you a little bit about this later, that's kind of the thing that you want to keep track of is identity first, class, and then meaning. So here's the facets, the Q6 facets, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So hence the name Q6, the 6 questions that business people want answers to. Around each square, you can see subfacets, I guess you could call them, which are also mutually exclusive and exhaustive. So for example, the who facet has a subfacet of person and a subfacet of organization. They're entirely separate. The where facet is similar. Place, position, and coordinates are mutually exclusive and exhaustive, et cetera, et cetera. So the listing on the side on the left, and I color code all of these to help people understand how I classify things. This is some of you in the audience might be thinking, oh yeah, this is Zachman all over the place. But I've sort of had running conversations with Zachman and his folks about what goes into these buckets. And Zachman's buckets have the same labels. It's a classic issue, the same labels, but different contents. It's a little bit more detailed than time allows for this presentation, but it's slightly different, and that difference makes all the difference going forward. A facet, another way of defining a facet is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive sets. As promised in the promotional material, here's your own 3D slide. You can print this, cut it out, and fold your own Q6 cube. I put little dashed lines for everybody who are challenged with scissors, but that essentially folds into this nice little cube. I have one on my desk. So this is a bonus for attending today's seminar, webinar. Okay, so this is the roadmap. So this is what we're talking about today is this faceted vocabulary core. We call it Q6 core. It contains master and reference data values combined with business terms. And just to make sure that I'm not talking to air, if somebody somewhere just could say, yeah, we still hear you, that'd be great.
Yes, we do, John.
Okay,
yes.
Cool.
Definitely.
Thank you. So that's the core. That's the starting point. The faceted content extends faceted vocabulary and makes links to things like documents, diagrams, all of those things that we store in folders. I'm using Box right now as my cloud content management application, and we are doing some preliminary experiments connecting metadata, faceted metadata to content with really, really good results, and I'll show you why in a minute. The next part is faceted analytics. So the point here is, first of all, you can start very, very small. You can spend a small amount of time and a small amount of money to give immediate results very quickly, if that's not redundant, but you get the idea. So, but you can also extend the faceted vocabulary using exactly the same facets. Remember, 19 facets are highly constrained to connect metadata to, or sorry, the vocabulary in the form of metadata to content. The interesting thing to me, when we first started talking about this model with some data warehouse folks, Barry Devlin was one of them. The facets that we use to classify and identify vocabulary are exactly the same facets that data warehouses use, and data mesh and data lakes and data lake houses, and take your pick of the flavor du jour. They just can't escape the fact that all human languages are based around the same 19 classes. So this, when we talk about, and again, I stress here that this conversation is about vocabulary, but it's also about where the vocabulary goes next. This is what I posted on LinkedIn the other day. Why I decided to represent this as a staircase that people might think, oh yeah, you just start at the top and fall all the way down. How hard can that be? But anyway, it's almost exactly the opposite, Howard, of what you posted, the graphic that you posted about cost and time and quality, etc. But this is the way that I look at it. If you start with words and make lists of words, facts became.
John,
Yes.
while you're mentioning Howard, I see he's got his hand up for a question, so I think he wanted to respond
shoot.
to that.
Yeah, John, if you could go back one slide, I was just interested in your core there. Is that Dave McComb puts that in terms of his core ontology? Is that what it is, or is that a more complete definition? Because he has the core and then he extends it, or domain ontology. Is that a similar mapping there?
Yeah, very similar, Howard. That's a great question, because Dave and I have had conversations. I actually attended his, and actually presented, which was really cool to be invited to do so, to his conference in Colorado 2 years ago. There's a lot of overlap between Q6 and what he calls GIST, G-I-S-T.
Yes.
This roadmap that I've put out here obviously can go in a number of different directions, not just to content. So I think, to answer your question, the core in the middle is the Q6 classification and sort of a basic, like it would be called an upper level ontology. And then you can create, so if you go off in a slightly different roadmap, you can create domain specific ontologies using exactly the same principles and facets, except the language will be different.
Okay.
So if you wanted to create a medical ontology and then say an automotive ontology, the language and the relationships are slightly different, but the classes and the edges are exactly the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. So this is sort of like the turtles all the way down sort of thing. It's quality, quality, quality everywhere. Quality concepts, quality collections, connections, correlations, collectors. So forms kind of in the content management world kind of represent a little bit of a challenge, because people use form kind of just kind of loosely to say, yeah, it's a filled out form or it's an empty form, but forms of quality collectors, and I think that's what they call semi-structured data. And then when you get down to analytics, the loop here connecting back to the words is when the quality feedback comes from your analysis, you get new concepts and new words and new connections, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the solution components. This will strike some as, and we're getting into a little bit of data modeling here, but not too much, so not to worry. But these are key concepts that Q6 is based on, this idea of Quant, an atomic unit of information. And all the atomic just means that it's a digital artifact that's self-contained and reusable. So it's just like any other sort of small piece of information. The model uses exactly the same properties on every quant. And I've drawn it as a circle on purpose because, as Howard pointed out, or the one other participant pointed out, I'm almost exclusively now in the domain of graphs. But you can build this using relational databases. You could use XML, you can use any or JSON or whatever you wanted to use, but the properties in Q6 are always the same. So this is really a sort of a super abstraction of the data layer. So we, instead of allowing or permitting different properties for different quants, we're saying, well, if you manage it correctly, properties will give you nice constraints. The quant types, these are just ways information are presented, either as abbreviation, acronyms, codes, definitions, etc. I've included edge there, but my developer doesn't like it, so he's hoping that I'll take it out. But this is really kind of getting to the granular bits. And then, of course, the quant classes, right? So, and I maybe should have reversed these, but I like to key on the other side. So the quant classes are the facets. Here's some samples. We've used the same properties again all the way across. The facet key is on the right. We got Russell Crowe as a person. We have patient as a role. Medicine Hat as a place. It's actual real place in Alberta, just south and east of here. And then surgery pre-op consent document is actually a digital asset. So it's a container of information stored in as a file. You can see the object identifiers here. The language, Russell Crowe has an NA, there's no language involved there, but patient is English Canadian, et cetera, et cetera. The only other thing to note here is that the create date's slightly different. I use a recent event, so just to manage things like when it was created, when it was edited or translated. So this is just a sample of the quants. Linking quants is also highly constrained. As I mentioned, there's only 6 edges that I use to build pretty much any model that I want. I should make a note for people who are familiar with graphs. The reason that I constrain these edges is because I think graphs could be in danger of replicating the same issue that relational databases have, and that's silos. So when you leave graph designers to build whatever they want, they'll put all kinds of edges, all kinds of relationships in there that make it much, much more difficult to join graphs. But if you're using a standard classification identification thing, it makes it much easier. So I'll just walk through these. We've talked about equivalence, membership. So for example, the first cut is always this value is a member of which Q6 class. But to your point, Howard, about questions about domain ontologies, you can create memberships. For example, tomato is a member of the fruit class.
Okay.
There's no problem there with that kind of flexibility. You don't have to always use a Q6 class. And that's where, again, to your point, Howard, that Dave McComb is saying with a standard ontology like GIST, you can build out anything you want and never lose track of the core.
Right.
This is the Meronomy representation or representation, I guess. So you can say this thing has this part has that, or this car has that part, or this in the case of geography, it'd be Medicine Hat is part of Alberta. Precedent is used to manage process maps. So if you need to have one event happen in front of another, is precedent has there. So these dark blue are events. And then property, the last one, because we're using the same properties in all of these quants, we want the flexibility to create property declarations outside of that edge. So it could be a weight or height or whatever of a person. So those property nodes, etc., can be connected this way. Here's some sample facets or facts and how they're connected. So facts are connected. So Russell Crowe, his person name, his name is attached to an equivalent ID. He has a role of a patient. This is how the is has. These are a little bit different edges. They're meant to be read in both directions. But so if I read Russell Crowe is equivalent, the name Russell Crowe is equivalent to 221008. That's simply a way of saying, in reading it the other way was 221008 has equivalent Russell Crowe. So it's sort of all in once, but it gives you sort of a nice bidirectional way of reading edges. The deck will be available, so I won't spend too much more time reading this one. So in the reuse arena, this actually came up fairly early in my Houston engagement. So I also worked for one of the local health authorities. Mark will recognize Alberta Health Services as the provincial sort of equivalent of a state health management or health delivery organization. But all of these that are highlighted in these different facet colors can be reflected in the facet colors for a relational record. So Arthur Doyle and Arthur Doyle, these are, he's a 55-year-old male, which is derived from his birth date and today's date. Male, Bowen Road, Nanaimo over here. So the structure of this so these two structures are semantically equivalent, which is kind of cool because now you can have a patient note, you can have a patient record, you can also have another patient record. This is the scheduling record. And you can also create a graph out of all of this great stuff and then join them in an algebraic sense in the overlap. And the overlap happens to be equivalence. Okay, so do we have any questions? Anybody want to ask a question before we start the next section? How am I doing for time?
Yeah, it's you've got 20 minutes left to the top of the hour, but you can continue if possible. That would be great.
Okay, do we have an hour and a half?
We sometimes people will just hang in there. Typically we go for an hour, but I've seen it go for hour and 3/4 if there's lots to talk about.
Oh, good. Okay. Good to know.
I have a question there, John, in terms of if you could go back to that text.
Yeah.
So I'm almost assuming that it's quite nice that we could read the document or read the content and extract it out into what would go into a relational table or almost into a data warehouse. Is that the sort of process that you're going from content to analytics, or when you talk to Barry Devlin, would it be, how would we almost see that mapping happen for analytics to take place or warehousing to take place on top of the content that you've just shown?
Yeah, so I'm going to break your question into two parts.
Okay.
So typically the way that I build out glossaries for business is, well, there's two ways. You can do it sort of the manual way and just keep building glossaries or building vocabularies manually. But the other way that's much more efficient is to take a structured table, like say the top one, the patient table,
Right,
and extract those into nodes and facts from the structured table.
So
And
go
then
from your relational to a
Yep.
graph table, yeah.
Yeah, and you classify them and identify them and make equivalents along the way.
Okay.
And then if you want to apply, and this is again, is this how people learn how to speak different languages, or how, babies learn to talk English, or babies learn to talk Dutch or whatever. They learn the words first, and then they learn to connect the words to different concepts, and then they can make sentences. So if you wanted to, the way Q6 analyzes, this is basically a doctor's note. It would say, okay, I've got, I would create what's called a concordance, like an index out of all of those words, and then match them to the vocabulary. Excuse me.
Okay.
So in terms of Barry Devlin's approach, I think we're very much on the same page. He's got way more experience on the data warehousing side than I do. So
his book on business unintelligence, I think that was done some connecting there.
Yes. Did that sort of cover your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so business vocabularies show up everywhere. This is a process diagram that I created for Alberta Health Services. It's not the exact same one because there's confidentiality things, but there's nothing. This is a very generic kind of process for process document for hip and knee surgery. So each of these, each of the underlying phrases are classified in Q6, but also are the individual words like patient, visit, GP, assessment, hip, knee, etc., etc. They always come, as anybody who's worked in the medical profession or the medical arena knows, there's documents associated with every single time someone moves. So GP appointment notes, joint assessment, all of these different ones are created in the course of this process. So this is the process as it's written, as it's sort of created. And what Q6 will do is to say, to your point again, is to say, we'll go in and look at all of these different words and phrases, and we'll pick up things like acronyms like GP, we'll pick up things like GPAPPT. So that's an abbreviation for appointment. We'll pick up those types of things. We'll also pick up the document types. And then at the end, you get this procedure wait time analysis. So this is the vocabulary that we started with. This is what it looks like when you classify and identify. I haven't put the identifiers or any of the other properties here just to keep this nice and clean. But this is exactly what happens when you parse a document or when you parse a database. And we came at this from both directions. And you can sort of see from the facet key, the quant for the how. So analysis is an activity, procedure wait time analysis is an activity. So you can see the classes and the types. So this is now a collection of very granular words, abbreviations, acronyms, phrases, etc. that we use for the vocabulary. The other ones I didn't list were the person quants. There was 249 people in this particular proof of concept. Interventions, obviously the surgeries were too long to list, so I just put them there in a, just to say that yes, all of these other entities are covered off. And to the point, to the diagram about the stairway, they're all high quality and they result in high quality data when they're combined into facts. So we started with basically a mandate to start analyzing wait times, which is I think almost in every jurisdiction, wait times is kind of an important concept. And so the provincial government wanted to know those two blue arrow things, decision date and surgery date, how far apart were they for each patient? So these are the dates. This is the surgery, which is an event, and I've taken the liberty of splitting them out. One of the things that's kind of important is these two nodes are equivalent, but they actually refer to the person in the role of doctor. So this model splits out a role node from a person node and makes no assumptions about how they're modeled, whether a person is a subset or subtype of role. It just says that I have a role of doctor, and I'm going to connect those two.
So John, that starts to
yes,
look like our party model that one has in your enterprise data models with the party domain with
right,
person and then the role and relationships that they have.
exactly. Yeah, and it's flexible in that party is a fairly broad term.
Yeah.
But role is very specific. So the other reason I like this split is because I can assign all kinds of information to this blue node up here, and put a dotted line or a dashed line to the person who's going to occupy that role. So again, I can build this component out for the party analysis and the party for enterprise with what I expect, say, a supplier party to do. Like, what are their activities? What are their responsibilities? And then I can hook them into a person or a company name, saying, okay, I've got a supplier profile, and I'm going to hook it into ABC Construction Materials Inc.
Yeah, powerful.
Right. So that it's nice. It's nice. And again, it's the separation of concerns. This is a knuckle. This is a knuckle, and this is the flange in between. So you get this nice. So you can. Well, I mean, that's where the hand analogy falls down. They eventually always do, but you don't want to disconnect your knuckles from the flange. Sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you get the idea of the flexibility here, right?
Right.
So the other thing here is that what are we counting? So this is the little what did I used to call these things? Constellations, I guess. So this is the event. There was 262 events. There was 246 people. To get to that number, we had to identify people who had 2 operations in the same period. So the 6 months ending whenever it was. So those are identical individuals. But we also had to separate out people with the same name but different birth dates, because they can't be counted as one person, because obviously they're not one person, they're 2. So this is kind of the again, some of the things we talked about at the top of the hour. So again, the research question was, what time passed between the decision to treat and surgery dates, and these are the independent variables we wanted to talk about. So in addition to the request from the province, the hospital itself, the facility, wanted to know things like room utilization, and so we built them a graph as well. Here's the event. There's 262 surgeries. This is the physical thing called the Medicine Hat Regional Hospital. I've used the abbreviation to keep it short, right? This is where it's located. These were not provided, but we know this from other data sources. It has 2 operating theaters, Theater 1 and Theater 2. So again, here's that articulation between the use of the hospital, the use of hospital, the use OR, operating room, and the use OR, right? This is a reference to the physical building or room. So in this case, Medicine Hat Regional Hospital is a thing. It sits on, I can walk around it, I can repair it, I can maintain it. Same with theaters, both these theaters, but their use and stuff is different. So the last part of this was to add content. So this is the quant. This is the quant that says we're talking about event, or a single event in one case. There's 2 different document types, and again, the document type is represented as a function of a digital asset. So this is the 1234.doc is the surgery preoperative consent document, and this one is the postoperative assessment form. Okay, I'm moving along here because I don't want to run out of time and leave time for lots of questions. So again, here's the big picture. The province of Alberta wanted to see this analysis between decision and surgery date. The hospital wanted to see this kind of thing between start time and end time to do analysis on these 2 theaters. And because this is flattened out, there seems to be a fair distance between this thing and these 2 things, but think about if you could fold it, you could make them closer together. So that's the big graph for this particular, that's what the data model for this particular thing. And you're probably asking, or you might be asking yourself at this point, well, okay, so how does this get back to vocabulary? But first, I'm just going to show you some mock-ups that we did for the executives. All of these values in the dashboard act as aggregators and filters. So you can filter by surgeon. I just, in the interest of privacy, I just use ex-Toronto Blue Jay baseball players. The document type, these are all filters you can click on if you just want to see the the pre-surgery consent forms. You can see those. These are all filters. These you can actually look for individuals, so you can see some of those, and these pie charts also act as filters. This is another part of the analysis that said, okay, so let's get down to brass tacks and start talking about surgery times by span of time. And we want each of those segments of time split by gender. We also mocked up for them, and just before I left, we created a map. So you can post all of these things at a geolocation and say you can click on any one of these dots and get patient information. A quick explanation here of how these dimensions work. So anybody who's done any sort of data warehouse or SQL kind of queries and stuff will recognize I want to look at all of the events by when they occurred and what their status was. I want to look at events by span within a span. So for example, it could be a span of 2012, or say November 2012, and then by event by surgery, or by what was the other event that I had there? Dang, should have made a note. Okay, but this one here is the
Was that the SPO? Sorry, SPOF. That was the document, right? That was related to that.
Oh yeah, so that could be like, yeah, by consent for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and then the event by physical asset. So this is the event. This is the physical asset with the use of theater. So these 3 dimensions form, say, okay, I'm gonna I'm going to have all the surgeries, going to split them by which theater they took place in. And this is the use. I'm not looking for all of the whole hospital. I'm just looking for events in that particular that physical asset with that function. And then this last one is I'm going to analyze the total population of people as patients by where they came from and what their gender status is. So it's, again, it's the same kind of, if you're looking at warehousing stuff, it's exactly the same dimensions. So here we get a quick review. So the big idea is to separate all the language values into a fixed number of facets. There's 12 properties and 6 relationships. Anyway, so that are reusable from business vocabulary to analytics. The small idea is to start with your business vocabulary wherever you find it. It's just, the Q6 core at this point is a service offering. It's very inexpensive. And it's easy to use. We have some bulk upload things in the works, and it's designed to be a very practical, useful place to start on the big project. Assign properties like a UPC code. So this is going down the road a little ways, but connect the faceted business vocabulary to content. And then use collections of faceted business vocabularies to perform the analytics. So I've got a couple of things to show you while we have some time. One is a look at the Medicine Hat vocabulary quants. I use Neo4j right now to manage this Q6 core. I've also connected the a patient file, or at least one of the patient records, the SPOC, as you pointed out, to a metadata that basically gives you a bidirectional connection between patient records content and the actual graph. And then I think that was the last bullet there was a mock-up of the connection to show that. So here's our little reminder here that greatness comes from small beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what Q6 core looks at the moment. And so I don't think I am, but my research tells me that this little tool, if it was embedded, for example, in the ubiquitous SharePoint or SharePoint sort of sites, that it would actually be quite useful. So say a scenario where a new hire doesn't know what. Yes, sir.
Are you showing? We still see your slider. You got your demo on.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to stop presenting and.
Please share demo.
Yeah. So it gives me the option to share screen or window. I have see, my screen is just, man, Teams, it's just, they make it way more complicated than it needs to be. I'm just going to share the monitor and see what happens.
Yeah, the actual window.
So you should be able to see the Q6 interface now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. I just hit the wrong button like you guys were saying before. Okay, so someone's looking up GP, it's an acronym. So here's the result set. GP is an acronym. It refers to a role or function. It's global, basically, because it's used in a very broad range of geographies, and it's active. So it gives you right away what GP stands for, which is general practitioner. A short description if you want. And then for Canada, our official languages are English and French. So it also gives you a translated acronym, which you would never find looking for GP in a SharePoint thing. It gives you the expansion of Médecin Généraliste, and it also gives you a French description. Right, so it's kind of useful. It basically gets you to I was working at H&R Block up until December last year, and one of the VPs, actually the VP of marketing, said, I'm really getting discouraged sitting in meetings with the other CXOs, and they throw around acronyms. I don't know what they mean. I want all my acronyms in one place. So it's kind of a humbling experience for somebody in a chief marketing officer or chief executive position to not understand what people are saying around the table.
Yeah.
This actually works on a phone. You can just pick up your phone and say, I don't know what it means, but I don't want to interrupt the meeting. So, but anybody reading anything in a business environment once Q6 core is in place, you can just go to the core, you can pick up your phone, or you can just keep an icon on your desktop and say, give me that acronym.
So John, would
yes.
that be possible to, I know some of the tools that we integrate actually are integrated into Word and PDF and even into the self-service analytics where they would underline the word in the document, and you could link to that.
Absolutely, and Kindle is a really good example of that.
Yes.
Because almost every word in a Kindle document is searchable.
Yeah.
As a right. So that's kind of
Yes.
what we're aiming, and I think that's a really, really good question, because when we talked about, reduce, reveal, reuse, repeat, the reveal part is to make business glossaries and business vocabularies available with one click. So yeah, if I'm reading a document like a sales report or something, and I didn't know that we had an office in well, Moose Jaw isn't, we're using that as an example, or Medicine Hat or whatever. I should be able to click on that. And this is a great question, because I should be able to click on that and not only get this view, but drill down into, okay, Medicine Hat. So H&R Block's a good example with their, they have a business model is franchisees. So it's a mix of corporate offices and franchisees. If you want to know the current set of documentation for franchisees, you should be able to do a search like this. I don't think we have anything here. CFA is not found, but in so the use case is I want to go from an acronym CFA, which stands for Canadian Franchise Agreement, which is a document type, find out all of the franchisees that have that agreement in place, and then be able to go to an individual franchisee and get the graph associated with that. That's the goal. And
so
you should be able to do it. Yep.
If we could do this almost like a data catalog on top of a data lake, and to actually have that metadata where we can navigate through the data in our data lake.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks in there, is a data lake has the same 19 facets as any other Q6 artifact, right? And I think the reason that they work at all is because those 19 facets are in play, whether people know or not. So this is a great question. You're hitting on all cylinders, because this approach actually makes that possibility real, and it all of a sudden makes data lakes not only useful, but you can start to reduce the size of them really quickly. And this is David McComb's vision, is to say, I've got terabytes of data or petabytes of data at an organization. It's in the euphemism now is data swamp. But if you can start to classify and identify and reduce the size and the complexity, you wind up with that tiny little cube that I was showing you earlier.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So the other one that I wanted to quickly demo was just appointment. So here I haven't got a description, but the appointment is an abbreviation. It's an event. And here's the full spelling. It's also showing up in GP appointment note and surgeon appointment note. So again, if these were clickable and I wanted to book an appointment or see appointments or do an analysis on appointments, I could certainly do that. I'm going to do one more. So this is an example of where people think, oh yeah, no, I've got Spock and but I've got this preoperative and pre-op, and yeah, they're all equivalents, and I get it. But if I wanted to do a search on surgery instead, oh, where's my coffee? Okay, so oh no, it's not surgery. Yeah, there we go. So the well, no, that doesn't surgery. So it should be another one. So surgery or post-op, but I had this written down. Let me go at it another way. Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to, I should have started with post, but anyways, so this is what I wanted to demo, the sort of, again, this the way this works, I have post-op. It's a position. It's sort of like a relative position, I guess. It's after the operation is over. Post-operative could also be a status, so post-operative medications, but for now it's a relative position. Post-operative assessment is actually, it's a process, but it's also a document used to record the process. So where people use, I need to see John Doe's post-operative assessment, they're talking about a document type, this class here. But if they want to know how to do a post-operative assessment, like what does a process what does a process look like, they might use this one. So this disambiguation here, right, is done in the Q6 way by saying, okay, so this is the use, this is the process. They're definitely related because this process produces this document, but they're not the same. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the deck. So that was what the Q6 core looks like. This is the small beginning that we've been talking about. I've just put in a random guy, this Abiodun. So Mimo, I can't quite pronounce his name, but it's pretty close. But you get the idea. So on this search, this is a patient that it was in this cohort, right? This is the full graph of his information. I haven't gone away from. I haven't entered the actual information, but you get the idea. This is going to connect this document in the graph to his to the document that's here, right? I'm just going to log in here real quick and I'll show you the connection. I think it actually timed me out because I had this okay, so we went from the graph, the node, which was actual document ID into box. But the other thing I wanted to show you is how do we come from the other direction. So one of the pieces of metadata you can see, this subject class is an event. It's related to 211031, which is Abiodun's patient ID. The document is a SPOC, so it's a surgical preoperative consent form. Security level is level 3, hospital and staff. But this GUID down here at the bottom, hopefully you guys can all see that. Yeah. That GUID is actually connected to the document, sorry, to the digital object ID in the graph. So if a person wanted to, and we're working with Box to start experimenting on how this might work, the creator of this document or someone who has access to the document can go back to the graph. But the more important thing is, when you create a graph of business vocabulary, words, and the facts, and all of these things are organized into a data model, into an instance of a patient record for a hip and knee surgery, you don't have to enter too many pieces of metadata in your document because, he said, going back to his deck, this document is connected to all of these data values. So one single node in the metadata can connect to this whole graph. So we've all data management folks, at least I come from the sort of well, a couple of different hats, but the data management challenge on the content side is to get people to enter metadata and control the metadata, et cetera, et cetera. But if you've built a high quality vocabulary and a high quality fact set and a high quality graph, and you just link it to one node, all of this stuff is not only clean, it's usable, and you can use it for analytics. So it's kind of like, oh, I just have to, and Dave McComb is really fond of saying this, to connect two graphs or two collections of data, all I should have to do is make one overlap with the other and it connects. So for example, this one, actually I have to go back there if it'll let me. No, it's just going to give me the document again. But in the previous view that was there, because I X'd out of it, if I have access to the document, I also have access to all the other documents of a similar type in the same folder. So yeah. It's kind of doing this really cool kind of if you think of this as kind of like a computer chip with multiple layers, you can get at the data layer, you can get at the analytics layer, and you can get at the content and vocabularies from anywhere. So that's, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So let's, oh, right. Yeah, I already said that. Oh, I said that too. Okay, cool. I'm ahead of myself. So one last thought for my DAMA friends, as Mark will attest, I am a full-blown member of the fully fledged member of the DAMA Calgary group. This was sort of my attempt to kind of connect what I'm doing here with the DM Bach wheel, and sort of put a little mini hub in the middle. And this is what I came up with for business language. So I get syntax, story development, vocabulary management, all of those types of things. Because I really firmly believe that if we can get the language aspect of data management more robust and more constrained and more sort of manageable, and still not lose the articulation, that yeah, good things can happen. So I'm just
Cool.
just want to give a shout out to my partner Ruben Sardarian of Infocratic. He and his team are building out the Q6 core and adding new features every day. We're also, as I mentioned, talking to Box via Box Canada to talk about how to connect the faceted metadata. We're currently looking for folks to help us with to knock the lumps off the beta version of this. So if you'd like to talk to me about doing that, we'd be thrilled to talk to you, because the next step obviously is to get some financial support for this initiative and start socializing it across the internet. I want to thank you guys again for inviting me to speak here. It's been a real pleasure. You made me feel right at home with your group, and hopefully this has been provocative, mind-numbingly interesting. So if you have any questions, please, because I covered a lot of ground, but if you have any questions, fire away or contact me at the address there.
Cool.
So Howard, I'm sure you've got 5 questions.
I do. So John, I like those last couple of comments you made. So you're connecting with all this linked together, when you basically said you should be able to add the document to that edge of the node, or that node, and then everything else gets connected. So we've got the graph node that's bringing everything together, that will then connect to the relational database, which are the facts. And so you're bringing all of these links between our unstructured and our structured world together in one. And we can navigate through all the different areas and pick up that those connectors. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty ambitious thing to do, Howard, but it's starting to show some really solid results, and especially when the biggest challenge that I've had over the last 15 years anyway is people really like the model, they like the simplicity, and they're saying, well, what does it look like? How can I use it? Where can I buy it? And I'm not a technical enough guy to build it on my own, so it's been a challenge finding someone who has a flexible enough neocortex to build this out for me. So
right. And
I'm
if
trying to
I
figure out how to stop sharing here, guys, but Teams likes to hide stuff on you, right? So
there's an X next to the leave, and it's next to your microphone and the leave on the top right hand corner.
Yeah, I can't even. Am I still sharing this? Can you see the
I see your desktop. You're seeing your desktop.
See
The snow.
your nice house, John.
Oh yeah, thanks. Thank you.
That's where John lives.
Oh, okay, lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, I used to build log houses for a living, and this is the last one I did. And I was talking to somebody in Boston. He goes, "Well, how come it's not finished?" It's finished. These are logs, so yeah. Let me see if I can find out where the teams went. I mean,
so John, whilst you're looking,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just interested in connecting this to some of the work people are doing on the digital twin.
Yes.
And comparing. Lexden Doop, for example, is extracting all of the DMBOK information I noticed you still got a DMBOK version 1. I was interested that Mark hadn't updated you on your wheel.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
I can help John out. He's got a typo on slide 16 as well.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Sorry. I make notes, John, for you to chat with you later.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
It's okay.
No wonder you have to buy
Yeah.
your wife flowers all the time.
If you hit the
Okay.
X there, John, I think that the X next to the microphone.
Believe, yeah.
Next to the microphone?
Side,
Not
no,
that one?
not that
Oh,
one.
this
Yeah.
one here. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That
that one.
There you
Okay.
go.
Good. We're back. All right. Okay. Thanks. Slide 16, you say, Mark. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is, yeah, noted. I'll update the wheel for sure.
So if we do the digital twin, where
Yep.
Mark is, where Lexton Doop is extracting all of the stuff from the DMBOK, and then having those activities and principles and things like that, almost what he's trying to do there is look at help with the organizational memory or the corporate memory, where people can work out if they want to do a data quality assessment on this data set within the lake, how would they do it, how would they connect, and what activities, and so almost bring the DMBOK and all the different body of knowledges together. So
Oh,
it
I
would
see.
help
Yeah.
people almost emulate the data management functions on top of the data that they have.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's smart. I like that.
yeah.
It's sort of the same kind of idea with the DMBOK overlay, and you can get down into how
Yes.
do you do it? What does it look like?
Yes.
Yeah. No,
Yes. Yeah.
that's
That's
cool.
right.
Yeah. 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 I think that's going to the digital twin thing is going to I think expose the idea that you have to have multiple layers, and it sounds like an obvious thing, but
Yes.
for obviously for security reasons, and there's a number of different ways to layer this particular model. So, for example, had a conversation with a fellow named Dave Dixon, who's here in Alberta, he's in Edmonton, and about whether the name Howard Diesel by itself in a Q6 registry in the person class represents a security risk, and he said absolutely. And I
Yeah.
said, well, wait a
Yeah.
minute. If it's not connected to anything, it's just a name that I've seen that might be important to my business. It doesn't have any age data or um, residence data or any of those other things, just a single name, Howard Diesel. And he kept saying, yep, that's a security risk. So I think that's where we're going to start to go in terms of disciplines and say, well, there is a way to architect, for example, GDPR that that uses registries and then fact registries above that to manage what people can and cannot see.
Mm, mm. So you'd be able to replace that with an ID, like a person ID, rather than
There you go.
Howard Diesel. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very, so in that diagram that I had, or the Quant diagram,
Yes.
the digital object ID is what would travel around it as a representative of
Right.
Howard Diesel, and his
Yeah.
is unique. But then again, if we had Diesel comma Howard, or Diesel T Howard, or H Howard or H Diesel or whatever, all of those are equivalent to that digital object. So that's where I use the semantic object, is to make that equivalence manifest, to make it declarative.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Sure. And then, sort of, then that goes back to where the data subject could be asking, what data do you have about me? You're now connecting all the documents, all the graphs, all the fact tables, and you've got this navigation path that you can show them.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a use case that I'm working on right now that it's called Who Knows Who.
Right.
A law firm is trying to figure out when engagements are entered into a database, and then for that company, who else knows someone in that company that was just entered, and and that's a graph
Mm,
application all over the place, right? Because the other
yeah.
aspect of that is, it's not enough to know that Mark Nolte knows Howard Diesel, but if Mark is a principal at a company that hasn't got any legal representation, that's far more valuable than you know, than say, oh, I don't know, John Steinbeck, who's you know, who's an owner of a small business that may or may not have the same scope as Mark does. So they want to be able to slice and dice things by, you know, by rank and by name and by company, et cetera, and industry. And you can do that with Q6, but they need to be flexible enough that they can link multiples and multiples of people by multiples and multiples of employees and multiples of layers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting problem, but it's solvable with Graph and Q6. Yeah,
and it reminds me of some of the work I've done with some of the banks or central banks where they start regulating money transactions and anti-money laundering and things like that.
Yep.
So they're picking up those relationships to understand who's doing what.
Yep.
John, that's fantastic. There's so many questions. I'm not sure if anybody else has. I'm sure other people have. I can keep on going here. Drew, anybody else? Mark, I'm sure Mark's got a question. He's smiling like crazy.
No, it's good. I'm glad I got up early to attend the talk. Thanks, John.
Yeah,
and
thanks very much, Mark.
It wasn't slide 16. I didn't write the slide number down, but I remember what you had one button. I'll talk later. We'll talk later. You have one button.
Sure, okay.
Minor.
I think I blocked you on LinkedIn now about some kind of. No, just kidding.
Don't do that. I love your commentary.
No, I yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, if the only snag in all of this is a kind of a couple of spelling mistakes and the wrong version of DM Will, I'm very happy to have been here and present it to you all. So thanks again.
Very good. From our side, John, it's been fascinating. It's a topic I think that is just people are getting more and more and more into it and excited about it because it simplifies so much of what we try and do. But,
yeah, it's a really easy entry point. So I know there's huge conversations. Thanks, Henny, for the applause. In a lot of forums about how difficult it is to get data quality started. If you can start with just a simple graph collection of acronyms and abbreviations, and it shows immediate results. The tricky part is to getting it exposed to the company, but yeah, it gives you a nice way to start, a nice easy entry point, and it's valuable. So thanks, Mark. Yeah, thank you very much, Drew. Appreciate it. I apologize for getting your name halfway through there, but yeah, more coffee. Where's my coffee? So no, but it's been great. It's been a lot of fun.
Cool. Howard, do you wanna wrap up and wish everybody all the best? Because I don't think we're going to talk to most of them before the new year.
Yeah.
And then unless you want to mention the conference.
Fantastic. Yeah, Drew, that was the last set of slides. So thanks everybody and thanks certainly to John. And then to all the DAMA members, there is a DAMA EMEA conference happening on the 1st of December. If any of you would like to attend, if you connect with me on LinkedIn and Debbie as well, we'll send you to the links on the EMEA conference. And it is free. So it's a day of learning and whatever it is. And would love to see you guys all there. And thank you very much. And have a fantastic Christmas if we don't see you by that time. And we'll see you probably on the other side of 2022.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah,
sure.
It's scary already.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great stuff.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you.
Thanks, John.